How's it going, everyone? Y'all ready to get started now on the second session here? We're going to talk a little bit about Report Writer. Now, please go ahead and ask more questions if you get to them. Paul and Tony are sitting there ready to respond to anything, and again, they'll stop me if anything comes along that you need to talk about. Now, we've done a couple sessions on Report Writer. We did a whole in our user conference. We did a presentation on doing the Report Writer. I'm going to really deep dive into it today and talk about some of the things that Paul and I do when we're talking to customers and how we go through our thought process on what we want to do. So let's go into the home page, and we're going to go down to Reports, and we're going to start with the Query Builder under the Report Writer. So Report Writer. And then the first thing I'm going to do is go into the Query Builder. So here's the queries and here's the builder. So we're going to do New. Now, before I even start, one of the things you always want to do is know where you're going, because you don't know which data set. And a data set is just a list of the fields that we're going to display to you. We don't know which one to choose unless we know what the output needs to be. So that's one of the big things that has to be is report definition. What information do you need to have? Now, the reason we want to make sure we understand that, because we need to know where we're going to pull these fields from. For example, if I need to know the last update to an issue, well, I can't use the issues data set, or I have to use the issues and notes data set to get the most recent note. So if I don't pull the right data set, I'm going to be searching for something that's not there. So that's the first thing you want to do, is get the fields that you want to output. Probably 70–80% of every report you're ever going to want to pull from the system is probably going to be the issues data set, the request data set, whatever you called your work items within Issuetrak. That's probably going to be your main data set you're going to pull most of the time. So when you do that, then of course it's going to list all of the fields that are available for you to see. And it's going to depend on how many modules you have, how many user-defined fields you have involved, how many different features are enabled, how many fields are going to be here, because it's going to be variable. So you'll see a bunch of them in here. One I do want to pull down, and I'm going to go and pull the assets data set. And this is, I'm speaking to people who have the asset management functionality enabled in Issuetrak. So if you have the assets. The reason I want to pull that one is because there are some differences in the naming convention of the user-defined fields here that is different than the issue record. The issue record uses the field name, period. Whatever the field name is, and it is unique. If you got 1 million of them in there, there's 1 million field records that's going to show up. But in here, because of the way the user-defined fields are defined, it's a combination of the issue type dash field name. So if you have contact name and it happens to be in the high school equipment, yeah, excuse me. Yeah, it's by asset type. So that's the asset type. Thank you, Tony. The asset type and then the field name. So what you're looking at is the asset type here. This is high school equipment. And then you may come down here and you'll see here's one for BlackBerry, there's one for camera. If the field name is exactly the same across multiple assets, it's still going to put asset type dash field name. So if it's contact name, it's going to be contact name, camera, contact name, printer, contact name, server, whatever it happens to be. Look for that. It's going to happen in here. So again, understanding that. The other thing I want to point out in the data sets is things like the notes. In the issues and notes data set, you get a combination. This is called a one-to-many relationship. And a lot of times when you're dealing with the issue database and you look at the output results, it's one line all the way across on an Excel spreadsheet. You get one big line of all the different fields that you've selected to be seen. And it doesn't repeat. It's one user ID, then another issue type, issue number, one issue number, next issue number, next issue number. Well, when you use the issues and notes, it's going to be variable according to how many note records that are on there, because the thing that's different from record to record is the note information, the note entered by, the note created date, the note text. That's the identifiers that change from row to row. All of the information in the issue record will repeat once for every note that you have. So you want to limit the amount of issue information you get when you use issues and notes and focus on the note entries. The only exception to that is going to be that field I mentioned a little while ago is going to be the most recent note. Most recent note. That will be a one-to-one relationship because it is the last note history record with the issue number. So that's an exception, but for the most part here, look for that multiple values in here. There are a couple of those when you look at the issues slash, which is going to be one table to another table is really what you're looking for. So it just depends on the tables. Play with them, work with them, see what the results are for the queries, and you can then have a good understanding of what information you really need and what information you really don't. Now, once you get the data set, and I'm going to move back in here to the issues and notes, the issues data set, just for simplicity. Then once that goes ahead and pulls up, then you can go ahead and you can pull the fields, and you're just looking at what you want. If I want the description, I bring it over. If I go down here and find the subject list, I'll bring it over. So where's subject? A lot of user-defined fields in here. One I try to always pull is the issue number. And remember, alphabetical order, E, F, G, H, I, J. Issue number, and I like issue type. Now, issue number. If I'm using the issues data set, I usually always bring the issue number over because it's a unique identifier for the record. It's going to make it always be unique. If I didn't do that, even though it's highly unlikely, I wouldn't, because subject and description in here, maybe I've decided I want to pull the issue, I want to pull the issue type, and I wanted to pull a user-defined field. Well, if I've got 15 records and there happens to be 3 differences between, and they all have the same issue type, and it has 3 differences between the user-defined field values, I'm going to see 3 records because it's going to subtract my 15 records down to 3 because that's unique values. It's a unique value for each one of the 3 entries in the user-defined field, 1 value for the issue type, and no unique identifier created because we didn't use the issue number. So the issue number is one I use in there all the time to try to keep a unique value per row. Very important tip for you to use when you're using this particular capability. Once you do that, then you can go in here and you can go to the next field. Now, one thing that's also interesting is this view all data set fields. If you want to know what fields are in the data sets, this is a good little way of doing it. It's got a lot of data because it shows you the data set name and all of the fields that are associated with it. Excuse me. So that's a nice little capability just in case you need to see or want to preview before you make your selections. Another thing that you can do now, once you've got everything done, you don't really have to pay attention to what order is because you can change order from top to bottom because you're really going to control order and output on your report. Now, the exception to that is some people create queries and use the query as their output. They don't create reports. I've seen that over and over and over again. Excuse me, got something in my throat. That means every time I run that query, I've got to go to the query writer to do it. If you don't create a report, you can't run it anywhere else. You've got to go to the query builder to run this.
And one of the other kind of handy things you can do with that, if you can show that pop-up window with all fields and data sets too, I wanted to mention, one of the nice things to do is to pull up that pop-up window that has all the data sets and fields and just do a Control F. So if you're looking for one field in particular, that user-defined field you created 2 years ago, and you know it's there somewhere, you can do a Control F and find it in that pop-up window very quickly and easily. It'll tell you, it'll show all of the data sets that field exists in. And that's a feature of your browser, not of Issuetrak.
That's
just kind of an easy thing to do that I've done in the past.
That's a real good tip to use with that. So thank you, Paul, for that. I appreciate it. And thanks for picking up my coughing fit, I hope, is over for now. Anyway.
That's what I'm here for.
Once you've done that, the next big step that you have is build your filter. Because now what you want to do is take all the data you're getting and you want to filter it out. So you go next and you get into your filter builder. The filter then gives you the ability to select any field in the data set. You don't have to have selected it, you can select any field. Now I'm going to use a couple in here. And the first one I'm going to pick on is going to be the submitted on. On usually means date. By usually means user. So that's one of the naming conventions we use. There is a little bit of difference between what the conditions will allow you to use when you do that. When you select a date field, you can select equals, not equals, greater than, equal to, blank, not blank. Now, days means how many days back, last 10 days, last 20 days, last 10 weeks, last 5 weeks, last 3 months. So it can give you some capability of moving a moving average across. For example, if you're trying to find out how many issues were created over a 3-month period, you can move it along a little bit. Today, yesterday, tomorrow, so you can create a report for the future. Sometimes you want to know what work is coming up, especially on the required by date. You want to know what issues are required next week, next month. So you can do that. Or if I want to look at information in the past, I'm looking at last month, last week, this month. So the query can be very time specific, and it's very important to use those because it filters the amount of data. One thing, because of the SQL Server timeouts, you're only going to be able to pull so much data. When you get over 1,000 records, and usually you'll get between 1,000 and 10,000 will come out pretty well. Once you start exceeding that particular records, the server timeouts will come into effect sometimes, and you may have to shrink your time frames down or your criteria down to get a smaller amount. Unfortunately, that's one of the things about working with the SQL Server. It's an output issue in this one, and that's because you're working in the web browser. So, but just be warned of that. It could happen. Now, so you pick a time frame, and let's say we're going to talk about this week. It's going to automatically fill the dates. If you go in and you set in here for this year, then again, it's going to select the dates. Quick little thing, if you want to change it to 2 years, like a lot of times what I'll do is I go last year and then change this end date to 2020, 2-year period. Paul, pick me up.
I use that one all the time. I mean, sometimes it's just easier to choose a date and modify the dates that are in there. So the other thing I kind of wanted to point out here that we haven't really talked about is that when you look at data, when we consume data, right? I've done a lot of reading about Power BI and things like that. You know, when we consume data, we're thinking about it in terms of time, almost universally, for the reports we're going to pull or the things we're going to talk about when we look at data. So filtering by a date range becomes incredibly important in Issuetrak because of that. That's how we think about this, right? I want to know how many issues have been submitted in the past 2 years. I'm consuming that data by time frame. Mike, if you can click Save Filter Expression. Now, something that gets the kind of the gotcha here, the thing that gets missed by our customers, you've got this field, right, submitted on, right, and a certain setting that goes with that, a filter that goes with that, it turns into a single letter, right? So a lot of my customers, they click Save Filter Expression and go on with their day, but they don't realize that that actually got turned into a shorthand, right? That is a reference back to that filter expression. What that means is that I can put more conditions in here. Each one will be referenced by a different letter. Go ahead and give us a sample field to filter on, Mike, so we can add a second filter expression. You want to give us a user submitted by or assigned to? And like Mike said, you know, we talk about by, right, or to, right, and that's going to be a name, a person, right? And let's do is not blank. just for the sake of argument, I find that the Boolean expressions are also useful, right? So this one, now you guys know, because everybody that can hear me is using Issuetrak now, you guys know that you can't have the submitted by field blank, right? So this is gonna match every issue in the system, but I think that's okay, right? Go ahead and click Save Filter Expression. Let's see what happens. Notice what happened. That turned into a B, right? So the shorthand for that second filter expression is B, right? And we put those two together. Now in filtering, when we actually want to do a complex filter, we need to tell Issuetrak how to put those two expressions together. So we're gonna get A and B. All of the issues that are returned by our query are gonna have to match both of the filter expressions. And the date range is gonna be a lot more limiting than our submitted by not blank. Yeah, that's a good point, Mike. The other thing we wanted to mention here, a lot of my customers kind of get mixed up and they don't realize when they want to choose users, they don't realize how the in function works. So you want to choose users from a list, right? So anybody in this list. And you can do a multiple selection from that pop-up window, just like Mike just did. We do save filter expression, and look what happened. That one turned into a C. And we're combining all of these with and operators. Now, Mike, let's show them the very bottom of the page here. You know, and operators are not our only option here, right? You can see in the examples down at the bottom, you can put these things together with some really nice Boolean logic, some ands, some ors, nots can go in there, right? There we go. And we can make it as complex or as simple as it needs to be, but it should always go back to our goal, right? That thing we figured out before we started, but the data we want to see on the end. What are we trying to find out? Let's go to the next step, Mike, unless there's something I'm missing. Now in a query, the last step is to give it a name so we can reference it later, and also to run the query. So let's see if we get any results. Go ahead and we're going to create a report later. For this one, let's just see what the query looks like. And Mike mentioned that some of our customers don't even like to create reports. Reports are going to give us some advanced formatting options, right? In this case, I wanted you guys to see what a query looks like with no formatting options. So if we can go back, Mike, now our query didn't get any results. So let's open up our filter a little bit so we can show some results.
That's the important part about running the filter first. Right. Make sure you've got data before you even move to the next step. So right, that's one of the things that I do there.
We could spend 2 hours in the report tweaking the format, right? And then click run and you get nothing, right?
Exactly right.
We want to make sure we go back and edit our query, get what we need first. Let's just remove all of the submitted by stuff.
I'm going to do it one way I like to do, which is take away all of the stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to run A, submit it on this range.
Yeah, if he wanted to come back and add that back in, it's still part of the query, but it's not going to be taken into consideration because it's not there in the filter statement.
Oops, something went wrong.
Well, we did something there, didn't we?
Wonder what we did. We're going to go back.
Ralph broke the internet.
Ralph.
We got a problem on that issue 572 is what's going on. You saw that it was on issue 572. I think that issue's become corrupted.
Oh, okay. Can you blow it away?
Let me see if I can just blow it away on my other screen over here. And I could if I were still logged into that site.
Ah.
And this is best practice, blowing it away, right?
Right. In the case where we know that something's become corrupted, where we know that the issue is not going to work, we're not going to be able to pull it in reports, then of course, yes, we want to delete it.
It could be there's some important information that has been deleted and the issue just doesn't show up anymore. That has happened in some situations. If you get those 500 errors, though, a lot of times the best thing to do is call support and let them figure it out. Then they'll give you advice on what would be the best thing to do in this situation. I have had users delete it and we recreated a user just to go ahead and have a report run or something run that had that user back. So it just depends on what the situation is.
And I think I think that's what we're going to have to do because I cannot reach that issue. I think something's going on. We got a little corruption on that 572.
Yeah, they've got a few of them in here that I think there is some corruption in here. So I'm going to actually take care of a few of them and see if that's one of them. I'm going to go back to the queries for a minute. And I happen to run a query in here. See if I can find it in here. There was an example query that I found that Paul had created a little bit earlier. And we found some blank organizations in here. So this is an example of a query that was created in here. It's for all issues. And the filter in here is looking for any issue with a blank organization. Now, as we all know, we should never have a blank organization. So therefore, there's a problem here. So when we save and run this, we're going to get all these records in here. And I wouldn't doubt 572 is one of them. But we're going to go back out of here and delete some of this corrupted data. So what we're going to do is use the mass updates capability. So we're going to go to mass updates. And in mass updates, I'm going to use that query that I just built with the report writer to get rid of those particular issues. And actually on this one, I don't want that one, Michael. You want this one.
That's right. I almost said that.
Thank you. I knew you were going to catch me sooner or later.
But not quite. I almost got it, but not quite.
I'm using this quick. So there's 19 records we know that definitely are corrupted, and we want to delete them all. So the report writer is not only for reporting. There are certain situations where you build queries. Mass updates is one of them that they can be used in order to update data. So those issues are now deleted. We'll find out if that query runs. If not, we'll change something else. But anyway, that's just an example of one of the things you can do.
572 is our query ID, Mike. That's not the issue that's giving us a problem. So I think we're just going to have to use a different query. Yeah, we'll have to get the support team on.
Well, we'll go to the all issues and just do that one because I know that one runs. So pick the fields. It's no filter on this one, so it's looking at everything. And we're just going to save and run it. So we've got data. Now, another thing to look at, and I want to kind of go back to this just really quickly, on this all issues data set, is that final capability at the bottom, at the back, and inside of it, and that's sharing. Report Writer has a kind of a unique ability within Issuetrak in order to allow you to share, and you can share with everyone, you can share with named users, so you can share it with 2 users if you want, or you can share it with a group of users. You can't do that with the saved searches. It's a little bit broader. It's looking at permissions, it's looking at organizations. But here you can go ahead then and you uniquely create a report for 2 people if you want to. And that's fine. You just go in and you do your search, and your search will show up, and you just use a control to pick your users you want to share with. So it's a nice way of doing it. The other thing as a best practice, you should go ahead and put some sort of a description in there. For example, if Paul and I are sharing the site, we may want to put Paul's name in here for queries he created, and my name in here for queries I created, because we may want to make them more personalized for us. Now, if it depends on your rights. We both have a system administrator rights in here, so we're seeing everybody's stuff. But if you happen to be an individual user and you're a user in the system, you're not an agent, you still have rights to create the report writer reports, then you may just want to put your name in there, because you're mostly only going to see things that you created or you have shared. You're not going to get that big view that Paul and I get. So, any questions so far?
Hey, Mike, do you want
Yes,
to
sir.
talk about the parallel between reports and the dashboard with regards to visibility?
There is a big difference in them, really, between the dashboard. The dashboard, when you go in and you see things, you're getting a filtered view by every panel that you look at. So it's a little bit different in here. And what's happening is in the dashboard, every panel you select in dashboard settings gives you the ability to see all of the issues, just like I just did a query for all issues. And it says, okay, this is all open issues in the site, open issues in the site, not all issues. That's a big difference right there. Dashboard is always open issues. When you go to Report Writer, unless you choose status of open or closed, it's all issues. No, it doesn't matter, open or closed.
I was thinking it's only going to display issues that you have authorization to see.
Right, it's controlled by permission. I was getting there, but yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, there's no problem. So each panel then allows you to see issues according to what you can see. So for example, by priority, this is the priority of all the issues you can see. If you're a system administrator, it's everything in the site. If you happen to be a department manager, it's everything in your department. If you happen to be an individual user, it's just your issues. So we're shrinking it down according to the permissions you have and according to the rights you have to see data. If you have administrative rights or can see issues submitted by others, again, you may see everything. So it just depends. So when you go to the dashboard, everybody has a unique view of this, and it's going to go ahead and be according to what your permissions and your organizational restrictions are in order how you can see, but it's everything in the site. The same thing will happen in the reports. When you go into the reports, you're still going to be filtered according to the same type of restrictions you have on the dashboard, by department, by organization, by user permission. If you can't see anything but the issues that you have submitted or you're involved with directly, that's all you're going to see in a report output. You don't get any rights to see more. You still are filtered. So you can create a report and use a query. You can create a report and share it with multiple users. Each one of those users may have a different view of those reports because of their permissions to see the data. Just like with Paul's research, in data, you're controlling access to issues. It doesn't matter how you get to those issues. It matters that you have access to this issue when you come into the site. In the backside of Issuetrak, there's always a generator in the backside controlling what issues you can see. So if you have an issue number and you go to search issues and you know it's issue number 1123, if you put it in and you're not a role on that issue, you're not submitter, you're not enterer, you're not assigned, you're not next action, you're not tasked to that issue, you don't belong to an email distribution list, you don't have permissions to see issues submitted by others, you don't belong to the organization, you don't belong to the department, you're not going to see that issue. So that permission, and it will not appear on any report that you see either. So that's kind of the difference that you're looking at. Rights and permissions still apply to the report writer as it does to the dashboard and other ways of viewing issues. Did that get to what you were looking for, Paul, on that one, Tony? Sorry.
Yeah.
Now,
thank you.
The next thing that you want to do when you're in report writers, move to the next step. And the next step really has to do with your ability to create reports. And this is where Paul and I find people will create queries and won't take the next step. I don't care if you create a query, always create a report. Always, always, always. You don't change the output. Just go and put it into a report. Because if you don't put it into a report, like I said, you've got to go to the queries to run it. You can't just go to home and go my CS trace and find your report. It's right here. The one you've created or the one you've been shared. It's right there. Click it, run it. Click it, run it. If not, you've got to go to reports, find it in the list, click it, and run it.
Just to be clear, those are reports and saved searches, not queries.
That's exactly right.
Just to be clear,
queries do not appear here. And that's why it's so important. Even if it's just exactly what the query builder shows, go and create a report off of it. The biggest thing about reports is its flexibility. You can have a query output that can have multiple fields. It's because when you go in here, and I'm going to do this report here called, in this one, I've got a couple examples. So here's all issues by organization. I'm going to do an edit here and run you through this. It's the all issues query. We've pulled in data from the all issues query, and we've decided not to use 2 of the fields that was in that query for this report. So you can choose to use or not use fields. you can just move them off if you don't want to show them. So it gives you the ability to change the report according to its need. This is where that design or that definition of the report is so important. Now, once I get these fields, now it's important. This is top to bottom, left to right on the output. Top to bottom is left to right. And of course, you can just drag and drop them however you want to show them. Once you're happy with the order, then you click on next. Now, sometimes if you just want like to do the query output, don't put any groupings on them. They don't need a grouping. Just go ahead and dump the data out. However, here a lot of times you can want to do groupings. In this case, I want to group the data by the submitted organization. Now, if I want to, I could go in here and also add the type underneath it. So it's going to be a subgroup underneath each organization. It's going to be the organization group and then the issue type group. And it's going to go ahead and have the next organization will have the issues by type underneath it. So it's going to kind of separate like that. That's what it's going to do. I'm going to leave this one in here so you can see the example when I finish. I go next again, and it gives you the ability to control whether you want to see the organization by ascending order or descending order. You can change that, or whether you want to see both headers and footers. Now, depending on the output, you sometimes don't want to see, okay, organization A, total number of issues for organization A at the footer. You just want to see organization A in the list. Don't put the footer in there. Or you don't want to see the footers, you want to see the headers. Footers are really important, especially if you're going to do any calculations, and I'll show you those in the final output. I would always use those when you do that, but other than that, maybe not. So I'm going to take this one off so you can see an example of a header without a footer. So here I'm going to do next. Now, this is one that'll catch you. You go in here and you say, okay, I want to select, and I'm going to get rid of the issue type, the issue number real quick so I can select it. I want to sort this by issue number. So they go in and do this. Okay, next. Guess what happened? I didn't save it. If you don't hit save sort expression and have that value appear in this field right here, bye-bye. Didn't put it in. It didn't happen. And you can change this from ascending to descending. If you have, you can go into multiple areas. Sometimes people want to do by multiple fields. So you can add in multiple fields in there also if you want to do that. And you can even change your order. Top to bottom is going to work here. So this will be first sort, second sort, third sort is what you'll get. Then from that point, we're going to move to this page 5, which is the final formatting page. There's a couple of really key things on this particular page that you want to pay attention to. For example, in certain situations, I do not want to see detailed data. I want to do a summary report. I'll make show footers only, and I do a summary. When I do that, I check this box to suppress the details of lines. I won't see any detail lines. Oh, on the other side here, these will be the columns here. So this is the column names that we're going to show. You can change them for this report. So you can modify the names here and it'll be for this report. Also, formatting is interesting. A lot of times you'll want to change this from a long date to a short date because it's easier. Another thing to keep in mind, queries give you date, time, output. If you want date, time, output, remove the formatting by selecting blank and you'll get date, time in your final report. Sometimes with numbers, they truncate and they take a like 1.5 will always be 2 in your report and you can't figure out what it is. It's because the numeric field value is truncating as an integer, so you may have to change it to a decimal or something like that. This is actually just a general number because it's an asset number. Labor hours is a famous one for that. I tend to remove the formatting when I'm doing any kind of calculations on the labor hours. I take all the formatting out of it so it can go all the way to the decimal format it needs to have, so my calculations will be right. And I'll control the rounding in the output of the Excel spreadsheet, is what I do. Also in here, there are some options. Say here, we can count the number of rows per section. If I did have a calculation, I would have a sum, an average. Was it sum, average, and what's the last one, Paul?
Count.
Count. Yeah, it's count, sorry. Yeah, so you can use those. You do have capabilities of changing justifications left and right and some control over the width. Best practice, leave width alone. You're not going to have that much adjustment on the width, to be perfectly honest, unless you've got like a 1 or 2 column report. That's about it. Once you've got everything set, then you hit next. And then again, just like we saw before, you give it a title. You can do your shares, and then your final output will come in. And I'm going to go to the full screen format because you do have a sliding capability here, so you can slide up and down the data. I'm more of a big fan of going view in full screen, and I'm going to shrink this down just a little bit. And of course, you have your first grouping and your second grouping, and then your detailed data. Clickable links on the issue number, clickable links on the subject in case you want to go and see the detailed record. So those are still there. You can export this directly to an Excel output. You can export it to a CSV, and it'll go dump them right on out. Now,
hey Mike, you're talking about we got count, sum, and average. I see a lot of customers rolling up the labor hours.
Yep.
So last month, customer X or organization Acme, we use so many hours, just rolling it up in aggregate. I also see a lot of my service desk doing the average ticket time or first response time.
Right, and that's a good one to use. Let me see here. Paul, you had an example in here, I thought, of labor hours.
The last one on the list, I think.
Oh.
Not positive.
Let's run it real quick. Yeah. You see how Paul did this one? It's got a lot of decimals in it. It's because he removed the formatting on the decimal, because when we're going to do the export to this to Excel, then we may want to do that. Now, what Tony is talking about is I'm going to make a modification to this once it exports out. I thought it, yeah, here it is. Sorry, it did its export on another area. So here it exported directly to Excel here. And you can see the formatting's a little off, so we want to change that. Boy, it wants to. It doesn't like me. Anyway, so we'll get rid of that. I'm going to change this one on Paul.
Please
so
do.
what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and change the formatting of it and do a clone. So I've got a report I like. I want to change it, so I'll clone it. Then the information is still the same, but this time I am going to select it by organization. And this time what I'm going to do is not show the headers. And I'm not going to care about sort. And I'm going to suppress the detail. And then I am going to do issue numbers. I'm going to do the count. And then I want to do the note labor hours here. And see, Paul didn't do that, so we're going to leave that alone. And what we're going to end up doing is do a sum. And I may decide, labor hours especially is a little tricky in the way it runs. So this will pull it over. You see, I just renamed it, and that's all I needed to do. Save and run. Now you've got a one-line summary that gives you the information you're looking for. 10.38.
Thank you.
Yep. So that's how quickly you can have one report create multiple entities. You can change the groupings. They can be by issue type, by organization, whatever you want to do. Just clone it and create a second one. That's a quick way of being able to change the outputs and get multiple reports. Now, we're running long. So if we got anything, any questions, anything from the gallery that we would like to respond to?
I don't see from the gallery. They're being eerily quiet, which I would have thought we would have had tons of questions, because we always spend a lot of time on this because everybody has questions. It's kind of weird they're being quiet on us. I don't know.
Tony, have you got anything else you would like for me to show?
No, I interrupted enough.
You have all the interruption time you need.
That's right.
Paul, how about you?
I think we showed them everything. The only other thing, the export to CSV is kind of a new feature. Speaking of our next topic, right?
Yeah.
We haven't always had that. Some of you guys that are, legacy users, right?
Yeah.
Have used Issuetrak for more than a year. Then you guys, that's a new feature to Issuetrak, being able to export by CSV.
Thought of something I did forget, just to remind, because this was report writer and schedule reports. I forgot the schedule reports. So I'm going to mention two things, and I'm going to be off of here so Paul can get to his next session. One thing is the settings area that's right after the reports. It's in the report writer. This is the settings that control the actual default formats. It also controls the number of maximum records allowed to be exported out or showed on the queries. So it's defaulted to 1,000 records. Some people will move it up to maybe in 1,000 increments as their site grows because they want to get more data. Again, 5,000, 10,000 is where you're going to may start into issues where it's dumping the information out. Contact the support team if you have any problems with that. The other one is this one down here, the number of records displayed per page. We ship with 10. It's what we ship with. So when you get a 100 record output, it's 10 pages. So I go ahead and I always change this, and I always go unlimited, but sometimes we'll go 100, whatever you're comfortable with. But I'll always check that value, because if you're getting a little short list, then you can sit and you got 40 or 50 issues in there, go ahead and change that.
Yeah, that's
the other thing is the schedule report. Now, the other part of being able to run the reports is you can't schedule a query. That cannot be done. So if you want to schedule this and share it with others automatically, then you want to create your reports. Now, let me go back 1 minute. I actually want to show you one here. Another example is frequency. So here, we have a report. It's a report writer report called a sample open issues by issue type. It's going to be sent out as an Excel. Now you can do report writer reports or save searches. Now, the frequency, we have recently changed this list. We haven't changed it in years, but we have recently changed it. You can now do an hourly, a daily, weekly. Now, hourly is brand new. You've always been able to do a daily or a weekly, but hourly is brand new. So now if you want to, you can go ahead and run a report hourly between a beginning point and an end point, and it'll send emails to the users listed as the recipients on an hourly basis. We do this for some of the Power BI outputs or some of the Tableau outputs that you want to have a continual data import or data source for. This gives you that capability. The other one that's brand new in this particular feature is things like the weekly. And I'm going to change this to weekly because it says run at. We have customers all over the world. 5 a.m. usually is when we've been running our reports. Well, 5 a.m. Eastern is not 5 a.m. for everybody in the world. So now we give you the ability to set your time frame for when you want it. If you want to send it, have a report run at 8 o'clock in the morning, Eastern time, 8 o'clock in the morning. If you happen to be a hosted customer, adjust for your time zones. But that'll give you some ability to do some changes. The nice thing is you take that report output and it'll send it directly to you by email. Then you can go ahead and run it. You don't have to go in and run it. It's in your email box. I have them set for dailies and weeklies that I get every day. I get monthly reports. I have annual reports. And I don't have to think about them. They're just in my mailbox. So it makes it nice. So I apologize, I did forget about that one. Okay, since I'm running right up to 2:45, I don't want to keep y'all late. Paul, why don't you go ahead and, since I've taken your entire time slot, and why don't you go ahead and finish us up with the last section that we want to do today.